Hello and a very warm welcome indeed to Quadriga, coming to you from the heart of Berlin. And the dust is just beginning to settle after Sunday's national election here in Germany. The vote handed Chancellor Merkel an historic fourth term in office. But it was a bitter victory, with her Conservatives slumping to their worst defeat in the post-war period. And the far-right Alternative for Germany party entered the Bundestag for the very first time with just under 13% of the vote. How will a weakened Merkel respond domestically and internationally? Our question on Quadriga this week after the election: what now, Frau Merkel? And to discuss that question, I'm joined by three keen observers of German politics, beginning with Andreas Kluth of Handelsblatt Global, the English language version of that publication, who says Angela Merkel is now a lame duck and will get weaker as her fourth term progresses. But in a world of bullies, dictators, prima donnas, of Trumps, Kims, Putins and Erdogans, she remains our last best hope. Note the word last, that's interesting. Also with us is political analyst Werner Sonne, formerly a very familiar figure on the ARD TV network. He believes that Europe needs Angela Merkel's leadership more than ever, but after her devastating election setback, she faces the desperately complex task of forming a new coalition. And a warm welcome too to Pascal Hugues, correspondent for the French weekly magazine Le Point. She says with the weakened Angela Merkel, Emmanuel Macron's dream of a fresh start for Europe is suddenly much more complicated. Much to talk about. I'd like to begin with you, Pascal. Tell us, if you would, give us a little bit of a flavour of how the election outcome here in Germany has gone down with all the surprises it brought with it.
I think it was a big shock in France and probably a big disappointment for Emmanuel Macron, who 2 days ago made a big speech about Europe, presenting his vision of Europe for the future. And he was sure that if the big coalition, I mean SPD and CDU, the Socialists, the Social Democrats, the Grand Coalition, was reconducted, he had a chance of at least realising partly his programme. But now it's going to be very difficult with the Liberals, partly with the Greens as well. And I think it's a bitter feeling you have in France that at last the French are back on the European scenes with a young president who wants to introduce reforms, who has ideas about Europe. And now the Germans are going to be, at least until Christmas, discussing this new coalition. I mean, you know, everybody, it's very funny because everybody was saying, oh, the Germans are so boring, it's going to be the same as usual. They want continuity, they don't want experimentations. And now here we are with big experimentation, no continuity and a little bit of chaos in Germany.
Andreas, you have been nodding all the while.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I was smirking when, you know, the Germans do have this reputation. They love order. They're a bit boring. They're going to sort this out. And Mutti Merkel is the best person to do it. And suddenly it has become, I thought it was interesting all along, actually. It wasn't boring. But suddenly it is becoming a real cliffhanger with a possibility, not a probability, but a possibility of actually failure. So not just negotiations that lead to Christmas and beyond, but even coalitions that lead nowhere at all, and then possibly new elections. I don't think that's likely. But Germany is, from the point of view of France, which is very important to Germany since the election, that because of the German worry that Le Pen could be the one next time, Merkel is really hoping for several months for this time to help Macron as much as she could. That is on hold for the time being, for the reasons Pascal just mentioned.
Werner Sonne, how much has Angela Merkel's political mandate been weakened in the last few days?
It has, of course, been weakened a lot. No doubt about it. But chaos is too strong a word. Cliffhanger, I think, is the right description right now. This is where we are, and it will take a while. And we have no government in the Netherlands. We have had, for 1.5 years, no government in Belgium, and life continued. And therefore, the same thing will happen here in Germany. We are not politically dead. We do have a working government, and therefore we will see a very, very, very complicated and complex attempt to form a new government. very open-ended, no doubt about it. But the world can rest assured Germany will continue to do its job. There is a phase of insecurity around us, no doubt about it. But in the end, because there is no alternative to this government, nobody wants new elections, it will happen. The only question is when and under what conditions. And the conditions will be very, very complicated.
The voice of reason there. I'm not sure that I quite buy into what you're saying. Just to get a feel for how apparently shell-shocked Angela Merkel appeared after this vote, we have this short statement from the Chancellor. Let's listen to it and then talk some more.
I don't know what we could have done differently. I put a lot of thought into this election campaign and I ran it the way I planned it.
What do you say, Werner? I mean, when I look at that, I see Angela Merkel, who is normally so cool, calm and collected, looking, I need a C word, clueless.
Yeah, clueless is absolutely the right word when we try to describe the current major players. It's even worse in Bavaria right now. There, the word is really big, clueless, definitely. And I was almost shocked when I heard Angela Merkel on Monday saying we did everything okay. There was no need to change. Of course, we can't go on like saying weiter so, let's move on like we did before. That's impossible in German politics right now. We do need change, no doubt about it. But the central question is, how will we achieve that goal? And before Angela Merkel can really enter into any meaningful negotiations about a new government, she has to clarify her relationship with her sister party, CSU.
We'll talk about that in just a moment. Andreas, I just want to hear a little bit more about Angela Merkel, how her psyche is at the moment. You know, the Financial Times said she has taken a hit. That was quite evocative.
Her psyche, I think Merkel, I once wrote a large piece just about her body language, I think, which suggests she has, I talked to a psychologist about this, low cortisol levels. She does not get stressed as easily as other people get stressed. I actually happen to think even though the situation is intractable, she's probably the least bad or the best person for it. So her psyche I'm not worried about. She said something very interesting in the roundtable discussion on television on election night that in calm, there is strength. That is her motto. So she's going to stay calm. And as you know, her principle is to slow things down. The fact that things will be slow and will take it works for her. Mm-hmm. She likes to decelerate things, observe, allow others to make mistakes. So I don't think her psyche is as destabilized. I just think the world, the political world in Germany around her has actually changed. She's in a new situation that will render her weaker.
What are you telling your readers in France about where these coalitions might go, how long they might take and how much jeopardy, how much risk there is involved in all this?
I think just to come back to what you'd been saying, I mean, I think calm and self-control is in this world where you have so many loonies around is a very good quality for a leader, especially for a German leader, because this is a very important country. But I find Angela Merkel a little bit stubborn and almost deaf. I mean, it would be very important for her.
She's not listening,
now.
you're saying? Deaf.
She's not listening to her people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, more than 1 million people who normally vote for her deserted her to vote for a party which is at the best populist and nationalist, at the worst extreme right, with a revisionist undertone. I mean, something quite nasty. And she says, yes, we have to get these people back, but I don't hear enough how to get them back. I don't hear enough, you know, you really have to react now against that. Mm-hmm. And let's see if this coalition will manage to get these people back, but you have to take these people seriously.
Werner, and I think an aspect of the problem that Pascal is talking about there is that, which we have rediscovered with this election, is that Germany is a divided country, East and West.
Yes, very much so.
The alternative for Germany getting something like 11% in the west of the country and twice as much in the east of the country. In the state of Saxony, a very influential and important state in Germany, they're actually the strongest force. Yeah, in that state.
Definitely. Yeah, it's pretty obvious this is the case, and one can regret it and one has to regret it, but that's the fact. And she has to offer answers. I mean, she comes from the East, but she never really offered or never portrayed herself as really coming from the East. She wanted to be the chancellor of all Germans. rightly so. But these people need answers for their worries. And it's, for an outsider, it's very hard to explain what's really going on there in the East. Because when you travel to the East and when you see all these cities and towns rebuilt, blühende Landschaften, as Helmut Kohl once said, he really created them big time. And then it's very hard to understand what's really going on in these 5 states. And but the fact is, people do not really identify with Western Germany. They never arrived there, and this is obvious now, more obvious than it has been. And therefore, Angela Merkel and the other parties as well need to offer new answers.
Let's just
as complex as that is.
Okay, let's just get some pictures now. Go back to the pan-European challenge now, facing Germany and other European countries from the AfD and other similar parties in those other countries.
Sunday's election was a political triumph for the AfD. The party will have more than 90 seats in the Bundestag.
This is a warning for German politicians. The people want something different. The German people do not accept Chancellor Merkel's migration policies to the extent that they have been implemented.
Right-wing parties now have seats in the parliaments of 20 EU states. That gives the party leaders confidence.
Their presence is beneficial, and we will continue to work on building the Europe we want.
Austria's Freedom Party has expressed similar sentiments ahead of parliamentary elections set for October.
Our goal is to keep control of our country. That's what we intend to do. We have high hopes.
What sort of Europe do the right-wing parties actually want?
It's a good question, Pascal. We know that they are anti-immigration, anti-Islam, anti-foreigner, anti-EU. Are these populist parties across Europe now a genuine threat to the EU itself?
Yeah, I mean, it's a threat. It depends how much they're not in the government. That's the first thing. I mean, they have a lot of impact in terms of influence and voice and media presence, but they're not in the government. And so they're not able to make the laws or to decide anything. So that's a good thing. It's difficult. I think what Emmanuel Macron did 2 days ago is to try and rejuvenate, to give some new energy to the European idea. And that's a very good thing that a young man, he's going to be 40 in December, that's another generation, to take the relay. I mean, we know that the older generation who's known the war in France, in Germany, are very pro-European. Now it's this young generation, this globalized generation. He speaks perfect English. That's the first president we have in France who speaks English. I mean, you have to imagine
There's a prime minister who speaks German.
We have a prime minister who studied in Germany, who lived in Germany. Yeah, so it's a globalized generation. And if this generation tries to revive and to make the people clear how important it is to be united in this world, which is very complicated, and it's better to be a European bloc than if every country is acting for itself. But people are very frightened. And interesting, I just wanted to say that, interesting is that the AfD voters, the extreme right voters in Germany, do not vote because they are frightened of losing, or it's not the main issue, is they are frightened of using their economic strengths. They vote because for ethnic and cultural reasons. They are frightened that their culture will be taken away, their language, that they'll be invaded by Islam. So it's this, you have to calm down people and reassure them.
OK, so Emmanuel Macron is the antithesis to the anti-EU, anti-Eurozone far right. Let's just listen very briefly to what he had to say earlier in the week when he really threw down the gauntlet to Angela Merkel.
I'm proposing to Germany a new partnership. We will not agree on everything, not immediately, but we will discuss everything. To those who say that the task is impossible, my answer is you've become pessimistic. I have not.
Andreas, tell us a little bit more about Emmanuel Macron's vision for Europe and what he might or might not get from Germany now, what he might or might not get from Angela Merkel, whose hands are tied a little bit after this election, I sense.
I think a lot of his proposals are would have gone down quite well with the German elite just before the election. More collaboration in foreign and security policies, all of which are things that make good sense. But the important one, and the one that's going to cause the problems during these negotiation coalitions, is his call for a common Eurozone finance minister, a common Eurozone budget, a fiscal capacity, which the Greens in the coming coalition talks are for, which the Social Democrats would have been for, but they bowed out, which Angela Merkel herself might have even entertained, but which the Bavarian Sister Party, the Christian Social Union, and the Free Democrats rigidly and stubbornly will oppose, because they fear getting punished yet again by voters, because they fear that is the beginning of a slide into a transfer union from their point of view, where Germany will permanently subsidize other countries, and they want to avoid that. So this will be one of several key sticking points, and one reason why, because it's the big issues that, not the small, they will compromise on the small issues, but it's actually this time the big issues where they won't get on the same page. Mm.
Well, what are people saying about Christian Lindner, the head of the Liberal Free Democrats here in Germany? I mean, Macron apparently told friends ahead of the German vote, if the Liberals enter the government, which they look likely to do if these coalition talks work out, he said, I don't know what the French word was, but he said, I'm done for.
I will be dead.
I will be dead. He said, he literally said, yeah?
Yeah, I will be dead. Well, I don't know. He just said in this little film that you need to be optimistic, so let's be optimistic, but there are chances that he will be dead. Lindner is not at all known in France, and now we're discovering him, and he's a strong man.
He's being compared to Macron, generationally, the same kind of sort of...
I'm not taking any bet on that. There's a big difference.
Like what?
A difference of stature, I would say, and of...
It remains to be seen, doesn't it? Yeah. Werner, is Macron going to get a deal from Germany? There's a long way to go, isn't there?
Well, yeah, of course. You have to look at what Angela Merkel had to say about it yesterday through her spokesperson, and he said in her name that she is praising his speech big time. It was very important that he did raise all these important issues. But in the end, she did not support his ideas. And this is what we are facing now. Nobody in Germany really wants a transfer union. This is the most important point. Nobody wants that, and nobody can push it through. Nevertheless, there is some real substance to what he has to say. Europe has to come out of the status quo. It has to move forward, but the question is how. And therefore, it's important to say this new coalition will not be anti-European. The question will be how could we move Europe forward, but definitely not with a transfer union where Germany is going to pay big time for the other countries, especially in the south. Mm.
Christian Lindner actually said earlier this week, if the idea is to use a common Eurozone budget to set up a cash pipeline flowing from Germany to other European states, that's something we simply won't go along with.
That's exactly what I just said, yeah.
Andreas?
No, that is one other energy, climate policy, the Dieselgate crisis. Those are the others. Those are some of the others, and of course, refugees is perhaps the biggest. But we could just stay with the Eurozone for the sake of that, and that is one reason why I'm probably more pessimistic than you, that these negotiations can succeed. Mm-hmm.
Let's talk a little bit more broadly about what Angela Merkel can and cannot achieve on the international stage. You said in your quote at the top of the show that she is our last hope. Yeah, our last hope for achieving what, and why the last one?
She stands. I mean, it is interesting right now. Her stature outside of Germany, especially in North America, by the way, is gigantic, in even parts of Asia. It's only in Germany where we're close to her and we hear her in the original German, where we consider her weak now. But what does she stand for? She stands for a multilateral, not a unilateral world. Instead of America first, Germany first, China first, she stands for all of us together. She stands for cooperation. She stands for opposing violating the borders of sovereign states, as Putin did in Ukraine. She stands for what we used to know, including free trade and an open and global world, as opposed to a closing world of renationalization. That's what she stands for. And that's what we used to call the liberal world order. It was premature to call her the leader of that order, and she herself has said that's grotesque, because that's what German leaders must do. German leaders, since the war, have to keep a low profile and to manage expectations down. But that's where she is. The only possible partner she has on the, shall we say, multilateral and globalist and open side is Emmanuel Macron.
So how is she now currently seen in France? You told us about Emmanuel Macron. What about Angela Merkel in France, through French eyes?
It was very interesting during the whole campaign. The whole campaign focused on Angela Merkel, and she's a sort of goddess in France, or somebody the French like her calm, her ability to make compromises. She's not corrupt like the French politicians. She's very low-key, she's a mutti. And there's a lot of admiration, a little bit like Gorbachev, who was not so much liked in his own countries, but adored outside. I mean, it's in France, it's very, very clear. And I think even if she's lost a lot of power now, the French are very relieved that she's there to stabilize this very tumultuous world at the moment.
Werner.
I think 80% of what you just rightly described as the virtues of Angela Merkel will be supported by her coalition partners. There's one dividing thing, and that is a big one, and that is immigration. How will we deal with the immigration problem? And there you see a huge difference, especially between the CSU, her sister party, the party leader Horst Seehofer, the Bavarian Prime Minister, and Angela Merkel. And the central question here is the limit. Will they put a limit on the number of refugees that can come to Germany? The CSU wants this definitely, and Angela Merkel is resisting this, and so do the Greens, and probably we'll see what the FDP in the end will really say about that. But this is the sticking point, and therefore they have to find a solution, and nobody really knows how this will come about. And therefore, as I already stated, it's the most important question is how will or if Merkel is ready and able to reunite with the CSU. And this is the most important question that she has to attack right now. And until she has reached an agreement, nothing will move forward in these negotiations.
I think if I may sort of generalize this to what we're seeing across the West, times have changed so much that the traditional party landscapes are being shaken up. You saw that Trump is not a traditional Republican. Neither Republicans nor Democrats knew what to make of him or Bernie Sanders. Emmanuel Macron blew up the party landscape and came with his own. I think if you look at this conundrum that we're in here in Germany, Germany is overdue for this kind of shakeup. And even though the Germans like it stable, I think it's coming. One of the things for a possible future show is I can't see, if you said 5 or 10 years out, I cannot see this partnership between this Christian Social Union and Christian Democratic Union that's lasted for 7 decades. I cannot see that lasting much longer. They're going to go their separate ways sooner or later, and I think they're just not willing to admit it yet.
Okay. But the question here is, who is the new Trump in Germany? Who is the new Macron in Germany? Yeah. We only have Angela Merkel for the time being. Or does anybody see anybody else?
I thought you were going to mention another name there.
Yeah.
You know which name I'm saying.
Yeah, definitely.
But you're not going to mention it.
Well, I'll leave it to you.
Well, the populists are fighting against each other, and there's the rumor that the party might split in two. So, you know, it's not as strong as the Front National in France, not as organised.
I've got to draw on Werner's encyclopedic knowledge of German politics in the last decades. We've got a 4th-term chancellor. There have been 2 that have gone before, Helmut Kohl and Konrad Adenauer. What can you tell us about what clues that might give us about how this is going to pan out?
Well, in the end, people were tired of Helmut Kohl. That is why he lost the elections. And that will eventually, which is because it is a very normal process, will eventually happen to Angela Merkel.
It doesn't sound like it from this discussion.
No. Not anytime soon.
Yeah.
But whether she will be in office in 4 years from now, I don't know. I just don't know what it could happen to her like it happened to Helmut Kohl. And it's always very complex for a politician to find a way out.
My theory is that Angela Merkel has looked at both Konrad Adenauer and Helmut Kohl and concluded that they failed in two ways. They did not allow a successor, an heir, to emerge. And I think she will, in this term, decide to allow one to emerge, and that's why she's a lame duck.
One sentence.
About?
I'm going to turn away. I'm going to say the name that we were talking about is zu Gutenberg, the former German defence minister. We've got to go now. I can hear the music. Thanks very much for joining us. I hope we've given you plenty of food for thought on what next for Angela Merkel. Bye-bye and tschüss.